In today's video, we're going to dive into some trade candidates and some players that the New Orleans Saints could and potentially should consider moving this offseason, whether it's for cap reasons, whether it's just because they don't have a role, or it's to open up opportunities. The New Orleans Saints do need to make some decisions on some players and get their roster set for the 2026 season. Now, why would the New Orleans Saints make any trades? Well, like I said, you have to get some extra draft picks. You have 8 total picks before the comp selections become official, and then you can also create some cap space. As of right now, you're about $19.5 million over the cap. And so option number 3 to trade a player, open up opportunities for other guys on the roster. We're going to talk about some of these players here in just a moment. Got a pretty good list for you, but really quick, an updated look at our offseason sub battle. Ladies and gentlemen, we're getting our butts kicked. The Buccaneers breakdown, brand new channel. They're beating us. Falcons today, they're on a heater because they fired their head coach and a GM, but that doesn't mean their fan base is better. Let's show the bosses who the best fan base is in the division. Subscribe to Saints Now by Chat Sports. Now, we're going to start this conversation off with talking about a player that you could trade, you could keep. I don't necessarily know what the best decision is, but that's where you guys can weigh in and share your thoughts in the comment section. Option number 1, what about trading quarterback Spencer Rattler? For what it's worth, I don't necessarily think the Saints absolutely need to trade Spencer Rattler, but if a team is interested in his services, I am absolutely okay with moving this player. In my personal opinion, I think that he can be a high-quality QB2, and I think that he's really good in that role. He's obviously a professional. He's handled his situation really, really well in New Orleans, and it's very obvious. Tyler Shough is QB1. The New Orleans Saints yesterday, they announced that the Saints will be rolling with Tyler Shough in 2026 as their QB1. And I think when it comes to the QB2 position, if you have a quality player as your backup quarterback, I think there's really nice value in having that player fulfill that role. And I think that that is a role for the New Orleans Saints to get out of Spencer Rattler / Spencer Rattler could fill for another team, or maybe even be a potential starter at another spot. Like, look, in 2025, it's not like he was absolutely abysmal. There were mistakes, there were problems, but it was early in the season. You were playing against some good football teams, and it was early into the tenure of Kellen Moore as the head coach. So for Spencer Rattler specifically, I think it's really hard to predict what his trade value would be. Remember, he was a 5th-round selection, 150th overall a couple of years ago, but the New Orleans Saints' current regime is not the coaching staff that selected Spencer Rattler, so he is expendable in that regard. And so for the New Orleans Saints, you have a player on one hand. He's a 5th-round selection, only 1 win under his belt, so maybe that isn't necessarily going to juice up the trade value, but on the other hand, he's young, he's shown some flashes, he's clearly developed really well, and I think that Spencer Rattler could fulfill some needs for a team that needs a bridge quarterback, that needs a young guy, that needs a backup or something like that. So if the Saints want to trade him, they can, and maybe there's teams that'd be interested in his services, but I don't necessarily think the Saints absolutely have to trade Spencer Rattler because I think there is real value in having a nice proven QB2. Now, what do you think the Saints should do with Spencer Rattler? Trade or keep? Be the general manager, put on your decision-making hat, and let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section. Now, another player, the Saints, in my personal opinion, I actually think the Saints should look to move Pete Werner. I don't think it makes any sense to cut this player. I think that he's somebody in New Orleans that is a fine football player. Like, I don't want to take anything away from what he does or what he's accomplished, but for what it's worth, I really like what you have waiting in the shadows behind Pete Werner. And if Demario Davis does return, which it seems like he's very interested in returning, the Saints got to figure out a way to get him back, but we're going to have to figure out what to do to open up opportunities for players like Danny Stutzman specifically, but also Isaiah Stallbird. And I think when it comes to the New Orleans Saints, they extended him a few years ago because they believed he would take a big step. And he's been okay, but he just never really took that leap that you really wanted him to see. Cost you just under $8 million, so maybe you can try to free up some of that money. And in Pete Werner's case, I don't think he was a bad football player. But, like, again, I think with Danny Stutzman, with Isaiah Stallbird, I think with some of the young players that you have on the roster, you're not taking Demario Davis on the field. You got to find a way to get those guys on the field. So Pete Werner immediately becomes the player that you would consider getting off the field just based off a process of elimination and just what makes the most sense. Now, Danny Stutzman, in my personal opinion, he specifically needs to get more snaps. And what we saw in the very limited run that Danny Stutzman got on the Saints defense, he had a major impact. You could tell that he was bringing it every week. He was a jolt of energy, and he was an enforcer. Like, this guy was playing with his hair on fire. I was really, really impressed with what I saw from Danny Stutzman. I want to see him get more action. I want to see him get on the field more often. And I think in order to do that, you have to make a decision on either Demario Davis or Pete Werner. And if it's up to me, I'd rather keep Demario and move Pete Werner. And again, I don't want to cut him. I'd rather trade him and try to get something in return. Now, we got 3 more players that I want to discuss, including one guy that I know a lot of y'all do not want on the roster next year. But first things first, got to tell you guys about today's presenting sponsor, and that is PrizePicks. This episode of Saints Now by Chat Sports brought to you by the #1 daily fantasy app, not just in North America, but in the whole wide world, in my opinion. And ladies and gentlemen, the new year is here. We're trying to make decisions every single day. How about we make some good decisions and make some money? That's where PrizePicks come in. And if you download the app today, use our promo code CLNS, you'll get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. On PrizePicks, how you play is up to you. If you want flexibility, choose the flex play where you can get paid even if one of your picks misses. And if you want the biggest payouts, go for the power play. No matter how you like to play, PrizePicks is a great way to put your ball knowledge to the test, whether it's football, professionally, college football, hockey, baseball, esports, doesn't matter. PrizePicks is here to enhance your game viewing experience and also help you turn your opinions into some cold hard cash. For this weekend in the playoff matchups, I do not believe in the Carolina Panthers, so I'm taking the more on Matthew Stafford's passing yards. I'm going to take Puka Nacua to score 1 time, and then I also really like Drake May. I think he's going to have a pretty good day against the Chargers, so I'm taking the more on his passing yards as well. If you want to fade the picks, if you want to tail the picks, don't care what you do, just make sure you do it with the PrizePicks. Download the app today. Use our promo code CLNS. You'll get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup on PrizePicks. Shout out to PrizePicks for sponsoring today's video. It's good to be right. Now, a player that I know a lot of y'all are going to be not necessarily stoked to have on your roster next year, guard Cesar Ruiz. In my personal opinion, you can either make him a cut candidate, you can make him a trade candidate. Both options, I think, are realistic for New Orleans. And Mickey Loomis has expressed the awareness that the interior offensive line is somewhere that they need to address this offseason. And I just simply think that Cesar Ruiz is making way too much money for the production that you're getting on your field. I listed him as a cut candidate in our video a couple of days ago, and I'm bringing him up again as a trade candidate, because if you don't want to cut him, maybe you try to get some draft capital in return. I mean, shoot, you were able to trade Trevor Penning. Why can't you trade Cesar Ruiz? So with Cesar Ruiz, it just, again, right over $14 million for this level of production. I'm just not necessarily stoked with that. And again, it's nothing against Cesar Ruiz as a human. It's just, as a football player, I don't think he's getting it done. I know that there's been injuries. I know that there's been some problems here and there, but I think that you extended him. You got a little too excited to pay a guard, and that's why we're stuck with Cesar Ruiz right now. I don't think that he's been a player that's been ultra reliable in 2025, 2024. I don't think he was amazing. 2023, he was not that great. 2022, not that great. Like, again, I just don't think that Cesar Ruiz should be a part of the future. I think that when you talk about the New Orleans Saints, they need to stop playing this game of loyalty to a fault. It is nice to have some sort of loyalty, but, you know, I think that it makes more sense for a player like a Demario Davis or a Cam Jordan. I'd rather allocate the money that you're spending on Cesar Ruiz to other players to help make a better impact. That's just my personal opinion, if you ask me. Now, we're going to go to Justin Reid next. I think that he's a player the Saints could consider trading. And when it comes to Justin Reid, it's not necessarily because I think that he's a bad football player. I honestly think it's the same thing with Pete Werner. Let's open up opportunities for other players. And look, if you do trade away Justin Reid, hear me out here. What if you get the combination in your defensive back room of Caleb Downs, Jonas Sanker, Kool-Aid McKinstry, Alontae Taylor, Quincy Riley? That right there is really, really intriguing if you ask me. Now, Justin Reid, it's important to address the facts that he is a part of the culture. He is a Louisiana guy. Obviously, this was a homecoming for him in free agency. I don't necessarily think the Saints need to trade Justin Reid. He was good enough, in my opinion, to keep him around. But if you wanted to get younger and you wanted to get cheaper, Justin Reid is a player that you could consider trading. Again, I'm not advocating for it, but I do think when it comes to talking about this team, you got to think about the future and stop thinking so much about what happened last year and the prior years before that. Justin Reid, Fine football player. I really like having him in New Orleans. I think it's nice to have a reliable veteran in the DB room. But if Brandon Staley wants to get younger and he wants to get a little bit cheaper, I don't think that trading him away is necessarily the worst decision you could make. Now, one more player that I think could be on the trade block, Carl Granderson, the edge rusher. And with him, the thing with Carl Granderson, like, it's just consistency. It hasn't been ultra consistent, ultra reliable. He's had so many flashes. He's had so many hot starts and so many hot finishes. But then the middle of the season, just non-existent. Or you get slow starts, really exciting in the middle, and slow finish. It just feels like with Carl Granderson, it hasn't been consistent enough. A couple of years ago, 8.5 sacks, was really impressed with what he did then. But since then, obviously, Cam Jordan, Chase Young, those guys are leading your pass rush. You do need to have a plan for after Cam Jordan, but I think Chase Young, he's your perennial edge rusher one. He's going to be your lead pass rusher for the future. If you want to address edge rusher in the draft, you can get a high-quality player at 8 overall or even later in the draft in round 2, 3, 4. If you want to go and explore that option, move off of Carl Granderson, free up some money, get younger, get cheaper. I think that that's not necessarily a bad strategy to go about with Carl Granderson. Again, 6 sacks last year, 5.5 in 2024, 8.5 in 2023. We really thought that that was a big breakout for him, but then we just kind of have seen a regression since then. Again, it's not that Carl Granderson's a bad football player, but if you can get younger, you can get cheaper, and you can maximize your contracts, and you have the ability to bring in some talent that can be around a little bit longer, I don't think that the Saints should be saying no to very many trades. In terms of wrapping this conversation up, to land the plane, as my girlfriend likes to say, you need to operate as sellers this offseason. Mickey Loomis does not need to be going out and trading for all these receivers, trading for linemen, trading for DBs, trading for edge rushers. Like, we don't need to be doing a Max Crosby trade. We don't need to be doing any of that crazy nonsense. Let's operate as sellers one more year. Let's get the cap situation 100% intact to where we can be aggressive and we can be buyers in the future because, in my opinion, get one more year of a little bit more conservative in terms of the offseason and how you approach it and attack it. And then that way you can go all in on the next couple of years. You'll have Tyler Shough still on his rookie contract. You'll be able to pay players around him. You'll be able to build around him. And I think that that will really open things up for the New Orleans Saints as the future. Operate as sellers. Operate in a more conservative fashion this year. And then next offseason, we can go and have some fun and set off some fireworks. Now, if you want more Saints content in between these videos, I'm posting on social media all the time. X, Instagram, TikTok. The links are down in the comment section and description of this video. Or you can just search up Trizzy Trace on your favorite platform that you like to consume your social media. Appreciate you guys for tuning in to today's video. We're going to have some more content coming at you throughout the weekend. My name is Trizzy Trace Gerard for Loco Lopez. Hope y'all have a wonderful weekend, and y'all stay golden.